everyone. Very empty room, but thank you very much for coming. I'll have a lovely angry email out to everyone else at a later date. So today we're going to have a bit of a discussion. So beside me, I've got Tobias, Tom, and Brian. I could put doctor in front of all of those because they are all doctors. We've got Aggie University, Yokomping, and MMU, and these are the board members for ERN, so the Esports Research Network. You will have seen their names on a lot of the reading lists regularly. If you did live production workflows last year, you would have seen Tobias's name on every single one. Without fail. So, like I said, these guys have a hell of a lot of experience in terms of research. They've been working in esports for a long time. It's a great way for you to sort of ask any questions, etc. I've got a list of questions on my phone that I'm going to go through, some topics, etc. But it's an open discussion, so feel free to fire any questions as we go through. We're going to be about 2 hours. Brian is going to have to go about an hour in, so if you've got any questions directly about
whatever the fuck I do.
Yeah. He's the only person who's got worse ADHD than me. So, like I said, we've got a few lists to go through. I've gone through and taken some of the key things that we've gone through in terms of the modules that I teach on, but I have tried to look at other modules and other aspects as well. The reason behind it was because I wanted you guys to come understand the conference, understand the process. You've all got links to the online talks throughout the week. Recommend you look through all of them because there is some fascinating talks going on in terms of it. It's the only time that we are going to run the Esports Research Network at the university, within your time at the university, realistically. And it's a great opportunity for you to get a better understanding of the academic side of esports. So I'm going to start off with the question that everyone always asks, and we always have the same horrible answer to it. Where do you see esports in the next 5 years?
Should I start? Yeah, you're the founding chair.
Okay.
Do you want to introduce your roles in ERN as well, because I couldn't remember them off the top of my head.
I don't remember them as well. But technically, I'm the founding chairperson, so I'm boss, technically.
You are the boss.
Yeah, so that's my role. I'm at the University of Agder in Norway, and I'm one of those old people who are in esports for 25 years. So I had that question like 25 years long. But yeah, let's say... now it's getting hard. 40. Yeah, I think so. But it's the part where we have the optimistic answer and we have the pessimistic answer. The pessimistic one is the Saudi got it all. The optimistic one is that we are getting our... I can curse, right?
You can curse.
Okay, we get our shit together and make it into something inclusive where everybody can participate. So it's a global thing and a tool to connect people. So those are the angles. So we are at the crossroads at the moment.
Yeah, I guess I'd just chip in there and say that I think you don't want to underestimate what's taking place in esports at the moment, and that really is kind of a game for control and geographically where it's going to sit in the future. I mean, we understand esports as particularly European and Western, but at the moment the geopolitics of it is that it is shifting, to Qatar, to Dubai, to other places, and that there are broader kind of economic reasons for that work for them. So, what that looks like for the kinds of games that might be played in the future, particularly in the context of like mobile games emerging as, more popular forms of esports in that space, because it's got to respond to their audiences, So I think we've certainly had the conversation before about whether or not kind of a European esports will still exist in the same way, or should we actually get used to esports, coming through a completely different lens. So I think that's kind of one of the big kind of issues, like, and who owns it, as a commodity almost is a very important question as well, because a lot of these organisations are mobilising a way to establish kind of control over esports. So I think that we want to be careful and critical of that. Alongside that, I guess in the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to see more forms of standardisation, more forms of formalisation, because that's really how control is established over these kinds of products and services. So we're going to see probably more, I don't know what role the IOC will play, but particularly if esports does play, or maybe you could speak to that, but what can be played, how it can be played, under what circumstances, who has control over that are going to be kind of the more kind of dominating governance questions. And alongside that then, as things become more standardised and formalised, more kind of conversations around doping, cheating, all of these kinds will also manifest. But I would expect in the next 5 to 10 years, where it exists will be kind of fairly well established, and what kind of rules and regulations and governance systems are in place, what federations, for example, in the context of the IOC, or for example. So I think that it's really a question about standardisation, formalisation over the next 5 to 10 years.
I'm Brian. I'm the founding vice chair. I'm actually a marketing professor, but researching marketing is pointless because Google has all our data and all the other companies do. So I look at esports from a marketing co-creation of value perspective, really. And the biggest thing I've observed is that esport came from the grassroots, and since the last 10 years the pro scene has gone too far away from it. I did the podcast for the ERN. I've done one to talk to everyone, kind of they're more serious scholars. I've neglected my publications somewhat, but I've been talking to people a lot. And basically it's just this huge gap where, my friend is director of esports for NIP. And NIP are only floated on the stock market, start focusing on China and Dubai and these more lucrative markets. And I'm going, but you have to win stuff to make money from that. Whereas if you leverage your Swedish audience and grassroots, you'd have a potentially sustainable audience in the bad times, like a football team. Arsenal have bad times, still have stadiums full in North London. So for me, it just all depends if we can actually bring the pro scene to actually recognise the value of the grassroots. And as I'm sure a lot of you see Epic Plan there and stuff, you all know everyone in esports thinks their way is the best. So you got this is the way, and you go, why don't you just talk to each other and adjust? But they all have these held positions and ideas because they've been fighting so long to legitimize it that it's problematic. So I don't know where it'll be in 5 years, but it'll be bigger because it's every next generation. I have 8-year-old stepson, he's not allowed to play Fortnite now. He's on to Zelda, but they're all playing it. I'm teaching him how to play Smash, to lose at Smash. Occasionally I let him win, but the younger generations are brought up in this, and as I said, mobile is where the big thing is. So as we've got these generations of mobile kids that could, absolutely drastically change what a LAN is.
Yeah. I think that's quite an interesting one to go straight into, and you've all mentioned global and local, and that's something that me and Josh talk about a lot within Global Esports. And you will have heard me talk about this, your level 6 at the back, insane amount in the last three weeks. But one of the things I wanted to sort of ask you guys is, because we are now having this sort of dimension shift realistically, where Tier 1 is so out of reach or so out of touch, I guess, in terms of this global, these big teams, G2, Fnatic, T1, NIP, etc. What role does local have within esports moving forward? What is the role of localization within esports?
Well, I guess the cynic in me was to say it's the thing that's funding it.
Yeah, that's a good way to start.
I think fandom has changed quite a lot over the last kind of, 10, 15 years, and you talk about sustainability in esports teams. I think that it's the fans that keep esports sustainable, and I think that, but they're not even as interested in the teams anymore per se. Like I just finished writing about esports wear as a space. I find it a really interesting space, in fact, because a lot of organisations, 100 Thieves is particularly good at this as an example. They're actually fashion, they're into fashion in a big way, and more esports teams are doing this as a way to diversify their portfolios, is that they're playing on nostalgia, they're playing on exclusivity of brands, and they're buying into this space because they know that esports, top tier esports as a product, as a commodity, is not sustainable in its own right. They can't get always the big brands on board, and if they do, they don't get the enough money to keep them sustainable. So what they're doing is that they're finding new ways to connect with their fans, and fashion is a really interesting one, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the part where also addressing the local community is often really neglected. So if you mentioned G2, they are technically a German organization with Spanish roots. I mean, they are a legal entity in Germany.
Yeah, they are a legal entity.
But it's a part where they don't do anything for the German or Spanish community or anything at all. And you see it with most of the Tier 1 organization. Slowly, if you reach to Tier 2, they see their roots somehow, and they see to, okay, we have to cater to them. Take the examples, Carmen Corp is no longer Tier 2, but maybe Tier 1, somewhere there. But they are addressing the French audience, and it works for them. And that is as well the part where take the whole talent pipeline.
Yeah.
Where do you get your talents? I mean, now with League of Legends, apparently every team is shifting their whole squads in the LEC. And it's like 2 weeks after the LEC finals. And there is no,
we've had for years now, isn't it?
but there is no identity where you are not seeing who they are. Koi becomes, or Mad Lions Koi are now Koi, and before Koi was Rogue, and yeah. But that's a part where talking about social sustainability. How do you create a player? How do you create something you can sell? Take Faker. Yes, he is one of the best players, but he is also T1 for his old eternity. And those are the aspects, especially from social sustainability. How do you create an identity for a team? And all of them are terrible, and T1 is probably currently the best example, and they are not good as well.
Yeah.
What's the question again?
Oh,
It kind of went everywhere there. Localization, right?
localization. How? What's your stance currently where localization is within?
Well, my area is grassroots and sort of the ecosystems and legitimacy stuff. That's where most of my research has been. I'm from the city of DreamHack. Jönköping, I also thought John Coping, but the city of DreamHack, and we had DreamHack for 20 years, and I saw the quality go down over 5 years until eventually they left recently. But the good news, the deputy mayor gave a speech and he was boasting about how we had DreamHack. So, maybe, and I talked to someone and said, what? And she said, oh, we told the politicians, but they just don't get it. So we don't have DreamHack anymore. And the paper I wrote on was about how DreamHack actually allowed a lot of esport actors, like this biggest Smash organizer, Phoenix Blue, started there. A lot of Esport United people, which is the grassroots and culture, a lot of SCSF, the Swedish Esports Federation, started there because there was a legitimacy there, because DreamHack was there, and now it's gone, except in the deputy mayor's opinion. And what's happening is that because the LAN is so important, that there's a glitch is being started, which is the founder of DreamHack, the former head of strategy, and the former festival manager, who's my neighbour. They're starting a new LAN in Jönköping in the summer with 2,500 people, and my actual students in the course are working on it. But the thing I've observed from DreamHack is how important it is that people come together around esports, because I run around DreamHack talking to everyone and doing interviews sometimes, and they're like, oh, this is my mate, we used to live together in London, and we sit here at DreamHack together for 3 years instead of going on the piss in Amsterdam or something. That's how they connect. And there's people telling me, oh, this is my friend I played for 3 years, but we're meeting for the first time in person. And I'm getting shivers even thinking about how important that was to actually bring the digital to the real life. And with Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up behind them, that becomes more and more important. So the role of local esports is huge if we can actually use it to latch on to build a sense of community that we've kind of lost. Liquid modernity is our style, that we're all like global, citizens rather than embedded in our communities, and localized esports has an opportunity to actually bring community from Discord to real life. So it is very important. So even if you don't make money of it, you're always doing something good by connecting people or bringing people, disabled people who use esports as a way to connect with the world, stuff like that. There's a platform for them to be there and to engage with each other. It's all really good. So my view is that like whatever happens at top tiers, we need to leverage how much games people play to provide a difference or a solution, since COVID screwed so many people up, including ourselves. Like, it's not just you guys. Everyone got screwed by it, and we need to rebuild that sort of sense of community in the real world. And esports is a platform to do it, because that's what, if a 10-year-old says they don't play games, they're probably lying. You know, it should be nearly 100% of them now. So it's there, and we need to actually tap into that for the betterment of society.
Yeah, no, but just on that, I would also say that I think that esports is still quite immature as a sport.
Yeah.
And I think there's,
I think we all agree on that one.
you know, there's quite a long way to go in terms of, like I say, formalisation and standardisation. As we see, and we hope that it becomes more standardised and formalised, you know, we will see, I would hope that we would see, we'd have to see for it to be sustainable, you know, more investment and resources within the grassroots. And so, I mean, I don't know how effective like collegiate esports is in the US at getting, you know, people into tier one, but certainly it's the example of where resourcing is needed to invest and bring kind of grassroots interest through that process of training, and that it's those more formalised and standardised structures I would hope that we would see for players, but absolutely for coaches and kind of and managers as well. So I think that that's really would be for me the sign of esports maturing as a sport in that regard.
But also the idea of education, where like but the idea of every local club, local football club has their own esports room where kids can play under supervision and everything. And I saw a lot of small town or small examples here and there around the world, and it is so amazing that just recently in whatever place, Magdeburg, Germany, they have an esports club, and it is funded somewhat, but they showed us around and had those kids who were socially how do you call it?
We'll call it on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make it easier.
And they had a place to go. Nowhere else to go. They had a place to go. There was a social worker around. It was not about any competition, but the idea they had a place. And those are the things we need to have in every city in some capacity, and that's where grassroots needs to go.
Yeah. I forgot to actually ask. I usually ask, what do you classify esports as? Do you classify esports as a sport? But I think we always seem to. I think we mostly agree on that one. But I will ask just to clarify. What do you classify esports as? Do you classify it as a sport?
I've got the answer to that.
Yeah.
Depends on the context.
I did the science for esports is word in Swedish. I wrote the background to help them.
Yep.
I say esports is esports.
Yeah, he says it's more than sport, and I kind of go with that. And he did the background analysis for the EU with with NEPO, and I always kind of go, I'm going to teach a class now, and I got him saying one thing and him in one slide of text. But it's basically, their report says 3 characteristics of esports. It's digital, it's played by humans, and it's competitive. And I have people smarter than me go, no, it's all the same. It's like, no. If I'm playing to rank up and silver lobbies in Valorant, I'm just engaging in esports. If I'm trying to beat a speed run or something, I'm engaging in esports. So that kind of more flexible definition rather than it's in stadiums. There's pro esports, there's tier 1, whatever, but there's esports is when you're online playing a game in some sort of competitive structure. Or when I was 6 years old, on the Spectrum, from that one family video that shows my first engagement with esports, playing my cousin on this crappy joysticks on the Spectrum, that was esports. It was digital, it was cassette-based digital, but that was the first time. So 37 years ago, I engaged with esports on the Spectrum on barely any colours, and that was esports, because the first game invented at MIT wasn't Pong, it was one before that, the early version, and they immediately went, okay, tournament. They invented video games and they went, okay, let's play each other. That was like the first game invented was an esport.
Spaceball is the game.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to sort of go on to, I will always be the opinion that esports is a sport, and you can change my mind.
No, we're all agreeing with that.
Okay,
give them more.
No, I don't think there's any more to that than that. Treasury might, no. Next thing is, I guess we've sort of highlighted it, and I'm going to start off with Tom in this one as the sociologist, the main sociologist in the room. What do you classify, when we look at esports, how do we look at it from a social identity point of view? How important do you think esports is to people's social identity?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that everyone in this room would agree that it's important to their social identity. But I think, you know, it's just another example of kind of fandom and consumer culture from my perspective. I think that, you know, it becomes a space for some people to find belonging, you know, but in no way radically different, in my view, to other forms of kind of consumer culture from, you know, if you're a football fan or if you're a basketball fan or a rugby fan. I just think that the what's interesting about esports is the fast-paced nature of it and how that shapes and what that says about consumer culture. So I think games open up all kinds of different ways of consuming in a way that kind of rugby union is a bit more kind of, you know, a little bit more isolated maybe, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I mean, I think that esports, the thing about esports, unlike rugby union, is that it is at the forefront of digital technology and culture, and so industries learn from esports, right? They look at esports, they look at how they're engaging their audiences, and they try to adapt those technologies and series of practices to their own. Like marketing is a good example. I think that esports doesn't, you know, I think marketers can learn a lot, advertisers learn a lot from kind of the technological inroads that esports are doing, because esports, you know, brand organisations, companies in esports are constantly thinking, how do I engage my audiences better? How do I use digital technologies to bring them in more effectively? You know, we were at a presentation of you know, last year, I think it was an Insider one. And, you know, there was an organisation there talking about, you know, how they actually planning to gamify elements of like Twitch, not from Twitch's perspective, but in terms of the esports event itself, so that you basically, the question being, how do we give more agency to the spectator so they feel more actively engaged in the process of spectating something? So, you know, how can you interact with, if you're thinking about watching Apex is, you know, my game, you'll see later when I fail at Valorant, Apex is my game, but, you know, if we give you all of these real-time analytics and you're there theory crafting, oh, they should do this, or they should do this, or they should rotate now, while you're sitting there watching it, how can technology, you know, do something to have what you're thinking about impact, maybe not the game for the pro players, but have some kind of tangible effect in that space? The closer these organisations get to doing those kinds of things will break new ground for advertising and marketing, in my view. So I think that's really the kind of interesting space here, in terms of we're learning an awful lot from esports about consumer culture, and how that opens up new forms of sociality between us as well.
He's the deputy editor for the Journal of Consumer Culture, by the way.
Yeah, so I write about consumption is my bag, but
but it's the interesting part what you're touching upon is that we always have this duality of identity, where this new innovative thing, but also this everything we are rooted in there, with a traditional perspective. So you are having this new digital thing, and taking the example of consumption, in-game advertising doesn't work. Didn't work 20 years ago. I always ask my students in League of Legends who are the sponsor banners.
But it doesn't work for the Olympics then either, because 50% of people will get Adidas or Nike wrong.
Yeah, but that's the part where
It's in familiarization
it's
is the
this
key.
familiarization, even though it's wrong. So you have this identity idea where we did it always that way, and it's always this missing part. Okay, but it doesn't work. And you have this conflict always in your identity. Okay, I'm doing something completely new, but I'm also want to do it completely old. And that's what I find from identity perspective, because it's so representative of how humans are actually working. And that's where we can learn a lot about it. And we should be, what you were saying with that, okay, use it as a case to try something new.
Yeah, and on that point, so just to come back, that's exactly what I see Apex doing at the moment. So they're trying all sorts of things. I mean, they had a Final Fantasy collaboration. They had a collaboration with the rapper. What's his name? I can't remember the rapper's name. They had a collaboration with a fairly famous rapper.
Snoop Dogg.
It wasn't Snoop Dogg. I can't remember.
Eminem.
No. Although I'm sure Fortnite have done something.
Marshmallow with Fortnite.
But that's that whole point, is that you're seeing the blending of these worlds in ways that are driving more forms of consumption, like these cross-cultural collaborations, and they're tapping into other. That's why I say the fashion bit really interests me, because it's like, how do you take something as fairly bog standard as a jersey and repackage it in a way that you can just you're making hand over fist, because you've put you've done a collaboration with Pokemon with it, or you've done a collaboration with Gucci or whatever. So I think that's really kind of an interesting space for social identity.
It actually leads quite happily onto my next question, which wasn't on my list originally, so we're going a bit off script now, but that's okay, because some of the questions you've kind of answered and haven't. So I'm fascinated by IP within games, and games having this identity of crossing IP. I play a lot of Magic the Gathering, which has an insane amount of IPs that they end up borrowing in game a lot of the time, as Will sits there and questions my understanding of any other card game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not a card game, it's a way of life. Jay's not here to defend himself with Celtic Guardian. But one thing that I wanted to talk about really is this sort of influence of sort of this metaverse or multiverse system, right, in terms of where games cross over from multiple areas. And do you think that because games are now becoming more social communities, I would say, in terms of this freemium model, we've sort of seen this over the last 5 to 10 years, and most games now release as free to play, or they fail, like Concord is a good example, and I'll talk about Concord a little bit later down the line. But do you think having these IPs is a good way for people to step into games?
It's a good question.
I mean, what do you mean?
Do you think the influence of IP and the build-up of IP, so IPs coming into different games, for example, Magic has just released, they're going to do Marvel this year, we've done Doctor Who and a range of other sort of IPs coming into
Well, I've
games.
got an 8-year-old stepson, and I play some Fortnite with him, and he's telling me about Metallica.
Yeah.
And I'm going, cool! And then he's going, I got Magneto powers, and I'm going, awesome! And then he wouldn't let me have them, and I always had to give it to him. But the metaverse is kind of bullshit. All the marketing academics are going, oh, special issue metaverse, we're going to see metaverse, when's the metaverse going to happen? 100 billion lost by Mark Zuckerberg, and the only actual one that is really still the seminal one is Fortnite, of course, which,
World of Warcraft.
Yeah, World of Warcraft has some stuff, but still Fortnite is the exemplar. And seeing it in action, because playing with an 8-year-old and using a mouse and keyboard is brilliant, because I was better than him on a controller. But there was Metallica, there was the Turtles. We were discussing IP. We could, there was all these nostalgic brands. He's like, which Turtles are favourites, and these crossovers, it can get you into music and discover new music, which is what Fortnite did. So that's a really good thing for if we look at, esports as part of consumer culture as a whole rather than its own distinct thing. It's all blended in with everything. Everything's a remix.
I think that I think it's IP, but it's not just IP. It's good storytelling. Like you're right about the failures of metaverse are just creating that space and populating it with content does nothing.
Mm-hmm.
If you throw a load of shit at the wall and hope it sticks, it's probably not going to really work. But actually, what you're seeing when it does work really well is because of really good storytelling, and I think that's really the moment. Is that how do you connect? What you're trying to do is bring in new audiences, right? With these products, ultimately, that's why you're having your Magic the Gathering and Marvel, because you want to, the old crowd want to bring in the new crowd, arguably. But I think the only way to do that is to tell effective stories. Why it matters to the universe, why it matters to those people. How it's going to resonate with both the Marvel group and the Magic the Gathering group, and so I think that effective storytelling is the way to to build a multiverse, not just create this space with loads of stuff in it and then just hope that, you know, people find it. So there is a real space for writing still, you know, good game design and all of these kinds of collaborations, because some collaborations absolutely fail. They don't work, and often they don't work because they're not telling effective stories, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the part where it needs to fit, and that is probably the most important part, and that's where Riot, with their approach of I have my IP and you have to come to me, like with Linkin Park right now, and how it fits their brand of arcane series and everything. Or just be observant, and I probably will the next year always reference the Evelyn documentary. You will cry, watch it, but you
I
will
was
cry.
about to talk about that one.
But the idea is, Blizzard saw it and used it for themselves. You can say a lot of bad things about Blizzard, but putting a gravestone into the game for that kid is something where it makes sense. It attracts people, but also it is, yes, we know our brand, we know our story, and that fits, so we take it. And this is the part where some of them fail. I mean, there was a Magic the Gathering with Fallout.
Yeah, that was
Nobody will talk about
Yeah,
it.
well, the deck building aspect of it was a bit janky. Let's put it that way.
I use the DHL and ESL sponsorship as an example in a marketing class generally, because you have 17,000 people in a stadium in Birmingham going DHL, because they did Dota 2 so well and they tapped into it so well. And DHL is such a boring brand.
Oh yeah.
But they had an entire stadium cheering us. I use that not teaching an esports course, but to teach a marketing course, how marketing can be done right. And
But
that's
that
insane.
commercial was amazing, where like that little Effie bot is driving around and then breaks the border into Dota and bringing that hero its mana juice, or I don't know what it was, but it was this connection, and suddenly there was this story and you were hooked. And yes, DHL is a boring company.
Mm.
Very boring company. It's not German, is it? You
The
announced
roots are American,
Yeah.
but it is owned by the
Yeah,
Germans.
of course it is.
Tobias is not German, by the way.
I
He's
know he's
Austrian.
from-
I always forget it too, don't
Yeah,
worry.
that's right.
ERN is German, technically.
Yeah, it is. So that documentary is actually really good. I was watching it on my way back yesterday while I was listening to it because I was driving. It's a very good documentary. I do recommend you watch it, especially level 6, because we got CSR next year and I'll be referencing it quite a lot in the Disability Week. And one of the factors that we sort of see in terms of it is a game is not just a game, realistically, especially esports in terms of that and the communities around it. For me, it's come from MMORPG for years. It's sort of that influence, I guess, where we talked a little bit about social identity, but that sort of collaboration where space isn't really an issue, right, in terms of how far people are or how isolated people are. It's mostly aimed in terms of you two, in terms of from Norway and Sweden, very isolated cities. They are cities.
So
By
100,000 people in Jönköping, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. 150,000 in the region, yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah,
It just feels smaller. It's
I was like,
divided
I
about-
swear I only went to like 4 streets there, so maybe it felt a lot.
Yeah, there's
smaller.
only around 4 decent streets. Yeah.
Grimstad is 30,000.
Yeah, I was going to say, after being sunburned, yeah, it's definitely. But one of the things I sort of wanted to talk about was, and I was talking about this last week in my global esports lecture, which was geopolitics and esports. We'll talk a little bit about Saudi Arabia after it, but how esports can be a benefit for geopolitics in terms of people understanding sort of other cultures. Not always in the best sort of scenario when people are flaming at you in Russian, but it's a good way to be able to have different perspectives. Do you think that, especially this generation coming through, do they have a much more understanding of global affairs because of it? Do you think esports has a role to play in terms of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the part where it is probably the best case of driving the European ideals.
Mhm.
Like there are no borders and everybody's working together. And that is one where I was quite surprised that Riot has 2 servers
Yep.
with the EU West and the Nordic shit.
EUNE, no one plays on that.
Yeah, but it's the part where you are learning other cultures. You're learning how to play with French people, and you probably get the best side of the French people on servers.
It's the only place I can actually play with a 12-year-old without there being an investigation.
Yeah.
You know, I actually had a situation where the Finnish dad said, I got to put my son to bed. His 10-year-old steps in, playing with a Russian or a Finnish, and his 30-year-old female Norwegian special needs teacher just starts swearing more in English because the 10-year-old Finn was there. That's where I learned Scandinavians don't mind if you swear in English. It's like a little loophole. And I'm going, is this really happening? I'm playing with someone's 10-year-old son and his Norwegian teacher and his Russian dude and stuff in a team, and it's like, that could never happen in real life in any other way, and there's no other platform for it. It's almost impossible to achieve, and you know, it's where I can talk to 15-year-olds, and in Valorant you don't find my age so much. I'm one of the older ones in Valorant, but CSGO, during COVID I started playing, and I found a lot of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s like that I could play with, because it's slightly older. I like Valorant more, but the audience is much more Gen Z and younger, so it's different, where CSGO's got an older audience. You know, you go to the game that satisfies your needs, but if you need community, so I don't need the community now that COVID's over, I can talk to people in real life. But when CSGO was better during COVID because it was easier to get people I had something in common with. So it's, you know, it's absolutely amazing that this happens and nobody kind of acknowledges it. Like it is, that's why the European Parliament said a key part of the European identity. And I play Valorant on the London servers because Stockholm is too full of Russians. And
that's the part where it creates the digital European identity in a way that, I mean, you left, so
sorry.
They did a terrible job in marketing this concept, where like, it is so amazing to see that you are playing borderless. You are playing with the Norwegian, with the Swedish, with everybody, and literally nobody cares about your race. Yes, I know the flaming and everything, and I will always make fun of French people, and
That's it, tap into the audience. Mostly English, yeah. We brought up on the page.
I grew up at the French border, so I understand you.
For you.
Yeah.
For you. So we've talked a little bit about social identity. We've gone through a few different sort of points. I'm just conscious of time for Brian, so I'm going to try and make one sort of focus towards marketing, because I'm going to leave it on that one, because let's use the marketing aspect behind it. What do you think is the biggest? What is the best example you can give in relation to esports and how it influenced the marketing distribution and how marketing has sort of changed, in part due to esports, but in terms of other areas as well?
Well, it used to be porn influencing everything, and now we're at a crossroads where it's you know, OnlyFans and streamers driving the direction of technological development. So from that angle alone, that you got sports are taking stuff from esports to make sports more interactive. That, you know, that the streaming thing, the parasocial interactions, which I am too old to watch someone stream. Like, I just want to play, but you know, that, yeah, you start to understand. A lot of people watch League of Legends streams while they're playing League of Legends. That's the background noise. You know, some of us are The Office or Brooklyn Nine-Nine or those ilk of comedies as your rewatchable, or Friends, some of you guys probably. You know, so it's the way people consume. Like we do. I think everyone here is guilty of this. Like, we half watch something, so we don't watch a new thing. I should watch The Expanse, but I've been warned. It's like you have to pay attention. I'm like, no. And so, like, people also dual screen esports. Like, who has just one screen? I've got one screen in your office now. I'm very upset. It's just like, feels like.
Do you know what? I'll get a Subway Surf film in the background, so you know where people have like two things going on at once.
Yeah, but that's it's, you know, it's indicative of that we like. Some people play Valorant and they go, oh, sorry, I'm blasting music. No, it's comp. Don't blast music. I need to get out of silver to play some better games. And so there's the way people interact, comment on stuff. It's like the Super Bowl. The ads are the biggest thing in the Super Bowl, right? And now all the platforms, and you know, it used to be like a lot of women, more females in America, say they deliver the ads, but they build social conversations around it, and they do the same thing in esports. Like that, if you have the stuff going on at the same time, it matches up with the society's needs. Yeah, our terrible habits to half pay attention to stuff, which everyone is guilty of, and we're all on our phones all the time. And so, you know, the way they look at esports is how do you engage an audience that does that, and that's where you look at what technological influence, where is the hybridity, or sorry for this word, you know, the word moist is horrible, right? Here's the next one, phygital. Sorry, there you go. It might supplant moist for you, but phygital is physical and digital. And to look at hybrid or fidget, hybrid's not even a good word for it. They never really came up for a term for this. So phygital is this new term, relatively new in the last few years, that actually captures better. So in terms of marketing, what you're looking at is how does esports maximize, how does a LAN maximize, how does an event maximize the intersection of online and offline, because we're all basically cyborgs. Everyone in this room, first thing you did after you stopped the alarm on your phone, picked up your phone and opened it. I'd say if someone didn't do that, I'd be very surprised. You know, and we're all, yeah, okay, I'm surprised. Not
Yeah,
by
I'm
you, though.
surprised as well.
Yeah, it was unusual, right? But that's where we are. We
I
are
sort of
like,
chucked it at the wall.
we are all digital all the time. If you don't have data, if you don't have Wi-Fi, what the fuck do you do? I'm downloading stuff from Netflix for my journey, including that documentary, which I didn't watch because I didn't feel like being miserable on traveling, you know.
It's a great
I
documentary.
know I will.
did
Murder
cry.
Ball's the one that makes me cry already. It's going to kill me. But that's the whole thing, is that esports, if you're looking for advantages for your careers and stuff, is that the aspect of hybridity or phygitalness of it. That you're actually able to go, look, I have learned about the intersection of digital and IRL. And that's going to be the single biggest influence. Where we did grant proposals around this, it wasn't successful for European funding, but we're doing it kind of again. But we kind of looked at this, that if you're looking for where digital and real world intersects, it's esports. And that's where you learn, if you're going to have an event for anything, that the lessons you learn from how do you interact with your audience who are half on their phones and stuff, or teaching even, lectures, how to do different things. That's where the biggest influence is going to come from marketing, as we step into a world that they kind of look, has to be seamless. You know, you go to a restaurant and they go, QR code, and you go, and then if you go download the app, you go, no. That's my line. If it says download the app, I go, nope. Next restaurant, QR code, I look at the menu, I go, maybe this is annoying me. But if it's download an app, I'm out. So restaurants could learn from how to make that seamless the way esports does, even though it's constantly changing.
You sounded like you're talking about the metaverse again.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Ready Player One is the kind of template for it.
I don't think we're too far. I mean, it's already happening really with some influences, but I don't think we're far away from a future whereby.
Thank you, Brian.
See you later, Brian.
Alright. Josh, do you want to throw that? We've got some loads of fandom stuff coming up, so you may want to jump on this one.
Shall I?
Yeah,
Yeah, I say I don't think we're too far away from a future whereby, you know, you're watching your favourite streamer or streamers and there is an integration whereby you can directly affect their gameplay. So you either donate to them in a particular way or you vote together as a collective and it will do something in the game for them. I mean, streamers are already set up like that. They're already doing these kinds of things like you know, outside of the platform that they're streaming on, but really that's the next iteration. As I see, it has interesting implications for sports, fairness and integrity.
Yeah, we have a lot of things in terms of where we can see it from a comparative standpoint. At least.
But in that context, I think that the next iteration, because really for the streamer, their main interest is how do I monetize my stream, and the main way is by getting their audiences to engage more with it and to focus their attention on them and not another streamer. So the more interactive they can make their streams, and the more, like I say, control that they can potentially give to their audiences. And I mean, to be fair, that's not a new notion. I'm pretty sure that what was it with Arnie in? What was the name of the film? Running Man. Something like that. Had that concept whereby people who were paying for blood would basically pay a certain amount of money to see Arnie, you know, do a particular execution. You know, that kind of concept, as dystopian as it is in certain literatures, I don't think we're that far away in the context of Twitch facilitating that, or, you know, other streaming platforms.
I think we really sort of realistically have seen it in relation to sport, at least with a great example of this. And unfortunately, a lot of things come from franchising, and franchising is always my favourite topic of conversation, as you all guys all know how much I love franchising. Don't worry, Seth is going to get a head full of it for me. because he's the most proud American I've ever met. But one of the things that we see in terms of this is sort of entertainment, this entertainment factor in terms of how we can sort of influence it from a comedy perspective is the mascot versus kids American football games, right, and stuff like that, where we start seeing this sort of crossover between these players who were probably quite good in their day in terms of it when they were at college. They probably played college ball, etc., and they're in these stupid costumes. And again, knocking over 12-year-old kids. And Boris Johnson did it first, but but in terms of that, it's sort of that sort of crossover in terms of the game doesn't really mean anything in terms of it, but it's entertainment, right? So it's taken away from that sort of competitive desire to win. Whilst Brian's bullying 12-year-olds in Valorant, it's also a comparison between that. So, moving on from that lovely conversation, we'll go on to the next one is, I guess, what is the transferability of esports in terms of the wider educational sphere?
All of it.
Yeah, go on.
I mean, you know how teamwork is, how you're team working, how you learn a lot of skills, how to interact with each other, especially on this digital perspective where you can work.
Can we find a new word for that?
Yeah,
I
I
really
hate
feel
it.
disgusted.
I want to say hybrid, but apparently it's not the right word.
No, that's right. Brian's not here. We'll go with hybrid.
Let's go with hybrid. I like that word more. Where you have the work analog and digital, and you go seamlessly between those worlds. And this is a skill most of the older people are not really good at, and that is your superpower against everybody else, but problem solving. The idea of, just try and maybe it works, it doesn't work. The whole concept of where shifting meta game, that this is constantly changing. This is something in the corporate world. Most people think the world works for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. It still works that way. Take 2 years and we had it with COVID and everything. We have all those conflicts constantly happening. We had this weird container ship in the Suez Channel, which did the 360 and everything stopped. All of that is quite seamlessly for us because it's something new. We have to deal with that. So stress management. You are all quite tilt-proof. I hope so, at least. Maybe he not.
I recovered from my heart attack by playing League of Legends, or have you know?
Yeah, but that's the part where you are learning that, and that's the part where critical thinking, all of those. Why does it need to be that way? I know a lot of esports people cannot bridge that. They are super critical thinking in pick and ban in League of Legends. If you take them outside, they do whatever you want. That is something where education needs to work a lot, where you learn a lot in esports, but you are not able to translate that into the corporate world. Project management. If you run an esports event, you know project management.
How's your game charts going, level 6?
We've done ours.
Well, the whole thing?
Well, there's like 13 weeks of it.
Okay, I was going to say, you haven't done the... you haven't
You
done
see? It's 14 weeks, so whatever.
It's not the end of this semester.
It works. So also some resilience you're learning where, and that's the part where you learn a lot of things, and that's what we need in education to piggyback on that, where we say, I know you know that, let's do it now in a traditional context. Let's do a budget. Horrible word. Give that to the guy who plays EVE Online.
Yeah.
And they are excellent warriors already.
Yeah. Don't play EVE Online.
Yeah, don't play EVE Online, yeah. But there will always be that one
Yeah,
guy.
there will always be that one person who has that sort of identity and process. And it's also quite interesting in terms of the games, I guess, that people play and what people are motivated towards playing, I guess. And you can sort of see it from that sort of, and from a research point of view, we can see it from who wants to do quantitative, who wants to do qualitative, where sort of people focus towards that. And sort of what people enjoy and what people dislike in terms of those aspects. And games are a good way of actually showing that to someone. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I played this game, and you can realistically assume some sort of cultural norms that they are associated with, in terms of if you play Football Manager, you either like football or you like spreadsheets. There's only those two people who go into that area. I'm the sort of person who likes spreadsheets.
Yeah, but that's the part where there was a study on SimCity.
Yeah.
They asked architects and civil engineers. Around 5 to 10% said, yeah, because of SimCity I did that career. And it is a certain skill you need to have. And same with Football Manager, where you are, there are scouts nowadays from Football
The
Manager.
managers who come through Football
Yeah,
Manager as well, which
someone
is
in
mental.
France.
Yeah, it was with
Auger, something like
Neath
that.
or someone.
Yeah.
He's ginger, that's all I know about.
Yeah, and that's the part where you are learning those skills, and also you learn the idea, did I even like that? And that's something where, if we are talking about education, we are at that moment in the situation where you can do everything you want as a good thing, but this is overwhelming. It is a bad thing in the sense you can do whatever you want, and you're learning like, okay, what now? So this identification of where you want to go with your career is something where we are currently really horrible, and games are already pinpointing you somewhere. If you are liking Football Manager, if you're liking SimCity, if you're liking whatever
Any
construction.
game.
Yeah, but the idea, if you just look at your Steam account, what you are actually getting, you get a direction where you might want to have a career.
I also think esports is a fantastic tool for just being able to identify and bring lots of aspects into it. So we do a lot of transferable skills in terms of our course, in terms of the process behind it, because I did an accounting degree back in the day, and I can tell you for a fact that I did not enjoy it at all. And do you know why I did an accounting degree? Because my mum was like, "You're really good at math," and I was like, "Great," and it was nothing to do with math. So you have to look into what you enjoy. Your best way to learn, I guess, is through enjoyment. Is being able to transfer those skills over from something into another realm and sort of have that value behind it. So next question or next area that I wanted to talk about was kind of moving on from education into a little bit in terms of that is how esports is coping with the change of technology, I think, in terms of AI and sort of the influence behind that, and how do you think that's going to shape esports in the coming years?
I could maybe say something on that, because I was thinking a similar line actually on education, about how esports is a brilliant vehicle for learning about the digital landscape and digital movements globally. I think there's something to be said for the significance of esports and what it signifies to especially nations, very powerful nations, say China. There's a lot of brilliant literature on what esports means to China in terms of, being a signal, if you like, for digital excellence in the digital economy. Being a leader at esports means that they're also a leader at building the best chips and having the largest platforms and being a real global player, economically speaking. So I think there's a conversation to be had, and maybe it kind of overlaps with kind of digital technologies, but there's something geopolitical about it as well, about what the significance of esports is as a signifier, I think, for especially these kind of large cities and nations where they really want to sort of centre esports as something that they are a leader in, which I find fascinating, and I think that's something that I think there'll be more about in coming years, about what it signifies.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. If you look like China, but take the example of South Korea. Yes, they are the greatest nation of all time, but they are banking a lot on what they did 20 years ago. There is not that drive of changing something, so they became somewhat lazy in that sense. And what I will always look to is Africa, where how did this will shape up, because this will be a mobile first continent. It is already. Is there even a space for what our big esports title are? I had a chat with Riot Games where I know we will come to IOC at some point, but where they were asking, why should we put a League of Legends server to Africa? There is no reason to put it there because there is no one who wants to play it. Yes, they play Wild Rift, Mobile Legends, and every other mobile, but League of Legends, not really. And that's the part where it's so interesting to see from a technological perspective that there are some countries where let's go all in, check how AI is working, check how those VRs and everything, and other countries like, yes, we are a great nation in Counter-Strike and we will ever be. And that's our tradition. And suddenly you have this duality again. We are this traditional country and we have to be good in Counter-Strike and therefore nothing else
Are
is
we
there.
talking about Sweden again?
No.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, is the fact that we've got this influence, I guess, in terms of we've got the old and the new, I guess, in moving that ways. And I'll bring on to the IOC in a little bit, and sort of this involvement of national identity and that influence in terms of esports as well. But I'm quite interested to see in terms of your perspectives on the influence of sort of tradition within esports and how is that had a hindrance or a help in terms of maintaining esports within a particular region. As someone who spends a lot of time away, just coming back from Austin.
Yeah, it's again the part where we have some traditions, but also esports is also quite forgetful, because it's the part where if you ever look up some stuff around the 2000s, half of the information is non-existent. So we are having this weird subjective traditions, how esports should look like. And weirdly enough, every country is saying it differently. So coming from the US, they have a long console history. Being from continental Europe, who cares about console esports? That's not even the real esports. And that's how the Germans are seeing
Yeah,
it.
it's alright, you don't even believe esports exists in Germany, do they?
That's the government.
Yeah, the
That's
government
the
are even worse
government.
in Germany about
Yeah,
esports. Surprisingly.
that's a drama in itself.
Yeah.
But it's a part where you have this national understanding how esports should look like, and then you suddenly have it everywhere differently. And that's making it interesting, talking about tradition, where you always have this cultural collision. And suddenly, at some point, you're like, okay, what's global esports? Nobody can answer that, because it's the part where it is something unique for every region, but you have something where it's globally understandable. And that's why it is so interesting to observe tradition and innovation, because it sometimes contradicts itself.
On the point about technology, I'd just say that I think it would be very interesting to see going forward what new titles become esports in the future, because I actually think it's very difficult to get an esport off the ground today.
I think it's overfluctuation of the markets,
Well-
in terms of European markets in particular, and I don't think there's been a huge amount of development
Yeah, I
towards
mean,
developing markets.
I think maybe you might be able to do it in the mobile space, which the audiences are growing in that space.
Yeah.
But
Which
what-
is more the southern hemisphere.
But what I think I think it's really important. It's easy to forget that ultimately any esports is a video game, and the video game is designed and is a commodity made ultimately for profit, and it's not going to get off the ground if. I mean, this is why we're seeing more esports be cross-platform, is so that they can reach the console audiences. This is why Valorant is, now on Xbox, and we've talked about there not being cross leagues like there are on Apex and things like that, and you can get into all the kind of sporting kind of dialogue about it, but ultimately they're doing it because they're trying to reach new audiences, because that's how to make money and stay kind of economic. So I think that it'd be very I'm watching Deadlock with some kind of interesting eyes
I think most people are at this
see
point now, aren't they?
how that kind of. But there's been a history, recent history of certain titles positioning themselves as they're going to be the next esport, and inevitably just falling flat. And I think that it's actually quite a difficult market to get into, even though it's a time when lots of people are talking about its relationship with the Olympics and kind of the formalisation of it. At the same time, what those titles will be, and new ones coming on. So I think that's the point about technology. And I think the other point about AI in particular that's relevant, first of all, AI will do an awful lot for flaming, and I really do think most of those systems in the future will be pretty much offset by or run by AI systems, just as for economic reasons more than anything. So a lot of reporting systems in games will just be basically AI run with some of the highest level stuff flagged and checked by people.
Yeah, it's really starting to happen with Riot a lot.
And I don't know, I've got a curious optimism that we might see a form of competition emerge whereby players, rather than have it be player versus player, as in human versus human, we might have more human versus AI. Because I think that there will be and I know this is, but maybe it's controversial.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
very
think it
controversial
is
with
controversial
me, it is.
because I think that as AI, as we begin to really fully appreciate the capacity of what AI can achieve, we'll realise that that is an ultimate form of competition for us. And so there might be circumstances, there might be games that might not have been created yet. That I don't think our current games would do it. I don't think anyone's really going to watch.
We did it with the Dota bots.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to watch. That's not the game I kind of have in mind. I'm thinking that there will be a game that really brings that capacity to be an artificial intelligence to bear, but I don't know what that is.
I can imagine that being an event, because it has been before, like has been with chess, has been with Go. I mean, Go was considered like an art form for years and not something a computer could do, but the moment it could, and the moment it could take on the best player in the world, it was a few years ago now, but there was a high-profile South Korean player, and it was a big thing, DeepMind. I could imagine a game coming along where the game favours, teamwork dynamics, something where people need to do
people
it.
work
then,
together against an AI.
But there can be a moment where AI maybe catches up with that and there is a tussle, and I can imagine that being a big event. I don't know.
But I did it with StarCraft, and that was quickly dealt with.
Yeah.
Or but it's part where I think the interesting part about human is we do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And the stupid stuff makes it fun to watch. It's something where if I look at American football, yes, American football on the NFL, it is the highest level, it's so interesting and everything, every perfect. Collegiate football, the kids are not good. And they throw the ball on wrong places and everything, and suddenly you have 40-0 and stuff like that. Something happens there. And with AIs playing against AIs, that's just boring.
Yeah, because there's also a fundamental eventually, we will get to an equilibrium where players in AI would be equally ahead, but that period, realistically, the speed of AI and how it moves, we would be in that spot for potentially not even a day before AI can outpace us. In terms of that, human processing power is approximately 144 inputs a minute roughly, between 144 and 212 is the highest any input goes into. AI can process things at about 1,200 something at this point, so we would just be outpaced, especially in stuff like RTS games, MOBAs, etc. There is conversations about FPS, but then you've got aimbot and etc. as well, I suppose. I'm going to ask you guys to think about your questions, because we're going to get to that point where I want you to start putting your hands up, etc. In terms of, I've still got loads of questions I can go through, but we're going to now start talking about policies and governance and all that lovely stuff. So in terms of that, so if you've got anything that you want to ask, etc., this is where I'll be starting to go through questions, because we're going to be on the same topic roughly for the next half an hour, which is around the part of governance and I guess the IOC. We've sort of highlighted it a few times, but I'm going to start off with in terms of the things that we're most familiar with, and then move away from that and think about it in relation to how much influence do you think the ERN is going to have in the next couple of years when it comes to the fact that we obviously are the biggest research network in relation to esports, and the IFC is investing time and money and aspects into esports at the moment, and for the most part throughout human history, policy is being written by academics and the influence that has in terms of it. And do you think that we are going to see this huge amount of policy changes in relation to what esports is seen from a sort of standpoint, and from this sort of local to this global phenomenon, and the changes that sort of has, and what role do you think policy is going to have in terms of shaping esports moving forward?
There's quite a few questions there.
Yeah.
I'll leave the policy one that's pretty straightforward. We can go through any of those. You can answer any of them if you can remember all of them. Brian's not here now, so he's not going to be a scatterbrained as I am.
I'll just say something very quickly. I
Yeah.
don't know if I can do it any justice. I'll just say that I think it's important to realise that research has an interesting relationship with industry, and I think that the role for me for the ERN going forward is to keep growing and to try to bring more researchers in so that we have a collective voice when it's required, because I think that's the thing that gives you leverage in the policy debate, is being an organisation that can speak to quality, peer-reviewed research and science, because I think that my feeling is that a lot of what happens in the esports space is either governed by tradition or by money or by both, and you know, well-established political players. Very little is governed by science, and so for me the hope is that more science is called upon in the future. But there's questions that I think we need to ask ourselves as researchers about the quality of that science, and those can be kind of, you know, having the proper educational spaces to actually do esports research and science is as important, because that requires investment and funding, and so to be able to do esports research well is not just something that comes out of nowhere, so there needs to be that, you know, those grants and things like that are important to it. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about the ERN's role. I think that, you know, it just keeps growing, and that, you know, it's already filtered into the EU directives, and I think that when, you know, from my own personal experience liaising with industry can be like, well, this is what needs to happen, and we are the game publisher and they will listen to us. I've definitely had that conversation with certain industry, but sometimes industry are a bit too quick to realise that, you know, supranational organisations like the European Union or the European Council, they often look to academics when making big policy decisions, because they realise that we're the people who sit in our offices spending our time doing the research on this. We're not just led by a monetary agenda or a political agenda, and so there is a time when industry would benefit from drawing more on academic research, because ultimately, you know, we will be feeding into EU policy or feeding into, you know, IOC policy or whatever in the future, and more collaboration between research and industry is always good too. Yeah, but there are such different timelines between research and industry. It can be challenging.
That was one of my things I wanted to sort of look at was, obviously research takes time, a lot of time. And this is where I want final year students, etc., to realise it takes a lot of time. Papers take hundreds, if not thousands of hours to even just get off the ground in terms of grants, etc., and funding process behind it is a lot of work. And esports obviously moves incredibly fast. That has a big influence, I guess, in terms of catch up, I guess. We've started seeing in terms of politics. They're trying to grasp the idea. It's the best way to how I sort of explain it. I was having a meeting with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport on Friday, and it was like trying to explain to my gran what esports was, and the sort of idea is the fact that esports has sort of moved on its own in this sort of wild west of esports. I'm sure all of you heard it being called the wild west of esports many a time at this stage. But realistically, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. That's not going to exist for much longer, because eventually policy will come back. We've already started to see, I guess, in the Netherlands is a good example of this. Netherlands, Belgium, with loot boxes and the gambling laws, I guess. And that's just going to continue to expand. China's another example with players and player health. And you may not agree or disagree with that policy in terms of 3 hours a week for children under the age of 18 in terms of China, but we are starting to sort of see this shift, I guess, because when money is involved for the government, that's when they start to influence it.
Yeah, yeah, and this is why for me, you know, making big policy decisions like limiting how many hours, you know, I mean, it's happened in the UK. It's not even, it's now the policy of hundreds of schools not to allow their kids to have mobile phones in the classroom. So,
Same in Norway.
you know, and that is informed by research, but, you know, anyone who looks into that stuff knows that it's, you know, a really contested space, and I guess it's a bit, you know, good research takes an awful long time precisely because it's good research, and sometimes if you want to make a policy decision, you can pull on bad research and help it justify your argument, and that's why again ERN has the role where it has its own voice, and it can say, well, actually, you know, the research on this is you know, is not conclusive, and more is needed to be done, and that some people see that as a cop out, but it's not. It's actually just the scientific method.
Proof, right?
And so yeah, it takes, you know, it takes a long time, but you know that it has a, and I teach my own students this, is that, you know, it's important to understand that there's not a one-on-one ratio between causality and experience. And what I mean by that is that the things that are causing people to make certain policy decisions have a much longer history and timeline than the policy decision themselves. So when you're researching them, you know, you don't necessarily have to be up with, you know, the exact thing that's happened yesterday to be, you are studying a different timeline, you're going further back, you know, and you're studying processes that sometimes are much deeper than the thing that's actually taking place. Yeah. And so that gives you that time to be able to do that. So sometimes, you know, I'm certainly I'm not up on, you know, what Navi's latest moves are, you know, I'm not, but I look at, you know, different things in the context of esports. So I think that there's a space for that. That's part of the scientific project.
Could I just add one thing as well? I mean, I think one of the brilliant things about organisations like ERN and just esports research generally is it is kind of jumping in the deep end with a lot of the, you know, kind of like the post-digital questions that we've been talking about today. But for example, I've been thinking recently about the role of publishers in the games industry, and when it comes to loot boxes and their role and relation, and there's lots of great research out there. There's lots of brilliant esports specific research which literally just jumps in the deep end of like, well, what do we know about things like revenue shares in games like Valorant? You know, what are the player relationships or the relationships between teams and publishers? And they are very real, tangible, ongoing discussions in the esports industry, and esports researchers are obviously in conversation with that. So I think at least one of the advantages, I think, of esports research is it does really just, it is very in the kind of deep end of those very like post-digital kind of conversations about the role of large global sort of transnational organisations and their influence really over our everyday lives, which...
And those are cross-disciplinary and multidisciplinary and ideally interdisciplinary conversations as well. I mean, if you take, you know, bit of a plug, but if you take the ERN handbook, I'm joking, if you take the esports research...
Yeah, it's on all their reading list.
Yeah,
so
if you take the new handbook,
yeah,
published last month, no, if you take the handbook as an example, I mean, it's 722 pages, it weighs 1.5 kilos or something.
Yeah, it landed on my foot, it hurt.
But it covers, but you know, it's the great thing about it, and the great thing about editing it was that we just got to see how much great science is going across the whole lot of it, you know, from the natural sciences and the social sciences to the arts and humanities, philosophy, history, culture, you know, sports performance, sports coaching, sports business, sports law, you know, just, and I think that that's the thing about esports as well, is that, you know, it can be a space that each of those topics in their own way, really cutting edge, you know, the stuff on fandom, the stuff on spectatorship, because it's talking about esports as the lens through which to analyse those things. So I think that that's the other thing about it, is that
we're getting into a place with practice getting brought into it as well. It was quite interesting reading the post this morning by Oliver Leith unfortunately can't make it in person because he's over in Germany and the University of Leipzig. But we've been doing some work alongside him and G2. So they're G2, for example, G2's whole performance team, who deal with all the G2 players, are part of ERN. They have all signed up to be part of it. They will use our research to benefit their outcomes, and we're slowly but surely getting there. We have the same issues as I guess most people had with education at one point, where esports doesn't need education. There was this big thing of like there was no need for education within esports, right? And we have the exact same thing, but probably 10 times worse realistically at some point as well. Yeah, Tom, I know. That's what I'm saying. So it's getting to that point where a lot of practice is now going into, like, theory is now going into practice, and that's really positive as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that esports, but because it's so interdisciplinary and it's so cross-disciplinary, is that one of the things it struggles with, and I certainly know that from an educator perspective as well, is that it doesn't have a corpus of knowledge, like a set corpus, and I think that could be tricky, and that was the other reason for the handbook, was to give something a little bit more kind of foundational. And I think going forward, as it matures and has time, there will be more key texts that kind of do some of that, as an educator, do some of that kind of heavy lifting as well, that you can be like, right, these are the core texts, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel like
I love him reinvent.
every year creating new content, you know, like.
Oh, we redo content. We rebuild content every year because someone does something stupid. Humans do stupid things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so where do we go into the questions now then? So we've gone to policy, and I think I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but the influence of the Olympiad, I think, is what I'm going to start calling this part. Is I'm going to ask you, Toby, because you've been in esports a long time.
I'm old.
That's all right. Yeah, it's a long time.
Esports old.
Esports old. But do you think the influence of the Olympics, except in esports, is particularly huge anymore? Because I have my views on it now, and I've sort of seen the changes, and I think at one point it may have been huge, but personally I don't think so much anymore.
Yeah, so most of the time I lean with you on that. The part is really that we might see a future where you have, I call it IOC sanctioned esports titles, like Virtual Taekwondo. Awesome game, watch it.
You guys have been watching me play Halo recently, that's fun.
Yeah, but that's the part where
Yeah.
you have Virtual Taekwondo, which is, just watch it, and then you have Hado, where you can actually watch it, and it seems like fun.
It is fun.
Yeah,
I
but
recommend.
but it's a part. You have those, and you have all the other IOC sanctioned ones. So they are creating a microcosmos on their own to get everything else. And the idea is for the IOC to have every sports federation build their own game. Worked really well with FIFA. They shot themselves quite heavily in their foot. But that's the part where we see that, and that's where I lean on you, where I'm saying, okay, it's not that relevant. But for the old world, it is quite relevant, because you suddenly have this command of the IOC that every National Olympic Committee needs to do something. Which led to the idea that you have, I think, one who actually has a plan, that's France. A couple of them who have the plan to say, we don't want to participate, like Germany will not participate in any shooter, whatever. And then you have whole panic mode in all the other ones. And that is the interesting part, where it is in a year, and I have no idea how even France is doing it. Everybody else will screw it up either way. But the part is
They
that
have so little faith in me.
I'm involved in the Norwegian and Austrian one.
We'll go down that route.
And I'm confident that they will send a team.
I don't know how good that team will be. That's what we've got to say.
That's the other part. But it's the part where I see it with a lot of National Olympic committees. They are actually talking with the esports federations. Some of them never talked with the Esports Federation for 10 years. Germany actually had a vendetta against each other. They sat together and signed the agreement together to say, government, give that thing the non-profit status. Just give it. The government will screw it up either way. But there is a signed agreement between the German Olympic Association, German Esports Association, and a German video game publisher. They hate each other. And that is some part where, from a governance perspective, that push helped a lot to move them, to get them moving. Will it be something good in the future? Probably not. They will fuck it up, and we will have this weird situation where esports is separated into things. But at the moment, at least in some countries, it helps.
Yeah, I found it really interesting, and I work with the Czech Republic quite a lot. I was on their board of advisors for the Czech Esports Association for a while. And they started off the Czech Esports Association with the International Olympic Committee to the Czech Republic. It was their idea to have the Czech Esports Association be a subsidy, of the IOC, because that's what they saw esports was. They thought it was a sport, and it worked well in terms of that. How it worked after a while when the IOC went, we need people who actually know esports to come in and take over it, was questionable, to be honest. But it's something that's quite interesting. We're starting to see this a lot, where countries not necessarily particularly steeped in history of esports are sort of coming and going, this is our opportunity to build something better, or build something new, or something more structured, I guess, with the help of long-standing organisations, because a lot of the time it's people who don't know that sort of structure a lot of it. It's not something that's commonly taught within any educational system, not even in the fantastic world of Norway. So
they're not good at that aspect.
So I think that's quite interesting in terms of whether IFC is realistically put esports as a sort of focus, and I think it will help maybe convince some more games to actually have better federations and better governance.
Yeah, and I think for for anyone who wants to see more kind of resources going to grassroots, then that it's a good thing for that as well. I mean, if you think about the context of the UK, by the IOC recognising esport as a sport, that allows organisations, national organisations, to be able to try to apply for sports status, which then opens them, potential funding up from UK sport and other kind of. So, if you wanted to do more grassroots stuff, where are you going to get the money from? Well, you've got to get it from the government, and the government aren't going to give it to you unless.
I think
Not they won't give it to you if you're a sport, but you've closed down certain avenues of funding if you're not recognised as a sport that historically have funded grassroots, initiatives. So I think that it helps in that kind of conversation.
I think it also helps in terms of that localisation conversation that we get back to, in terms of it with. I'm going to look at Ben in this situation because Ben's here, and I can look at it. Ben runs Control Esports, which is one of the big sort of grassroots esports in the UK, community-wise at least anyway. And one thing I always tell Ben is we need to get a location they're based from, because when we go into a sport, or it becomes a sport, and they want us to do communities and outreach and clubs, etc., that's when you get funded, realistically. I obviously do a lot of work with Welsh Esports, and I'll talk about this on Friday as well. But as soon as that door opens in terms of funding, in terms of it, if esports gets seen as a sport, within Wales, that funding goes up by 10 times. We then have money that we can invest into clubs, infrastructure, in this sort of local process. And I know a lot of esports teams are built on that idea, realistically, that eventually they'll be able to get funded and they can get localised in terms of it. I think that's the only way that we sort of see this Tier 2 and Tier 3 actually survive, because Ben will be the first person to tell you there's very little money that you can make in terms of that to even just cover the wages in terms of players, etc. So
but that's part which, because if the IOC is saying that, people are understanding it, even though not saying that it's good or bad, but the idea, and that's I saw with a lot of sports clubs as well, where Okay, the IOC is saying that, and as you were saying, if there is this regulation, that means it can get sports support. Like in Austria, I know it's not much, but the government gives 500,000 for equipment to any sports club who wants to create an esports. But it
That's
will.
more than money than we had in Wales for like 3 years operation.
Yeah, but that's a part. It came from the government
Yeah.
saying, here is a budget for 500,000. Yes, you have to fill out 40 pages and do all the horrible bureaucracy, but
That's how many pages you have to do to get an ID card, isn't it?
yeah. But it was this reaction of, oh, IOC is saying it is a sports technically, and suddenly you have that money that can be given to, same, Austrian esports has no money.
Yeah.
Maybe they have the budget like lunch.
Yeah.
And suddenly there is this amount, and suddenly a couple of clubs are founded. And in Germany, in North Rhine-Westphalia, northwest Germany, there is this collaborative program where, with the Sports Association, the Esports Association, that the Sports Association gave the information how to create an esports infrastructure through their system. It was written by the esports people, by the Esports Association, and suddenly they are talking with each other and trying to find synergies in a way where obviously the sports associations have so much more knowledge than us. But if they are saying, okay, we have no idea about esports, we have a lot of ideas about funding, let's work together, and suddenly you push something.
Yeah, and I think that's a great part where we sort of looked at it in terms of where we thought it in terms of, as in research, I guess, more than anything, where in time, especially when with IOC in more countries seeing e-sport as sport, even if it's not seen as sport in terms of the local sociological aspect of it, that's a different kettle of fish and a different viewpoint. You may not see e-sport as sport, and that's okay in terms of that. But from a government standpoint, that will be where influence in terms of funding, grassroots, etc. will come through from research. It'll be based back on in terms of what you guys will be publishing. I'll publish something eventually if I'll have some time at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it's a part where you suddenly also are looking at the topic from a policy and governance perspective. I am definitely for the idea esports is esports and it should be separate from everything, and because it includes everything into it. But I do understand in certain countries you have to go that path. Take the German example. I'm okay with saying esports is a sport, or they have a weird wording for it, because then no club needs to change their statutes. So they can just do it. They are a sports club, go for esports. And this is the part where you are at the point where like, okay, what is the right decision for this country? France, it is business. It is part of the business. Norway, it is a culture.
Yeah.
All of this debatable.
Yeah, I go back to this answer, and it'll be in my slides for my welcome talk. Because this is how we spell esports, and if you haven't got this, sort it out now. Because you don't spell esports with a capital E/S or capital S in the middle of it. It's esports with one word. But it's
Depending on the language.
Yes, and depending on the language, but we're in England and we speak in English today, only today. But one of the things that I think it will be based on the culture and those influences, and I think that will be interesting. I've played in the summer in the European Championships, and in Turkey, Hado isn't an e-sport and will never be an e-sport. It's a sport, and it only is a sport. It's the reason why they won, and they have full pro players, and they were in more money than I was as a full-time lecturer, but you know, it's fine. I'm not salty about losing. But the idea behind it is that we're going to see this sort of level of professionalism, and we're also going to see the opportunities at a local level. And one of the factors that I was looking at when I was before I started lecturing was I used to work for Northampton Football Club. So League One team, if any of you don't know where that is, Northampton is, it's in Mac in the middle of the country. And my job was for their sports area to use esports as a way to get people to come and watch games. So we had a big project with gaming, etc., and a sort of collaboration through this community and the community aspect from it. and they built their whole educational program. They did a BTEC level 3 in esports, and that's what they did for their football players, because it was a much more enjoyable experience because they were playing football, coaching way through football, and then there was a way of having that escapism through it. I think people will sort of start seeing that esports have that benefit and about that benefit to the factor. Has anyone got any questions? I've run out. Well,
I was kind of quite interested to kind of how fast esports moves as an industry compared to legislation. I think, would you agree that Concord also kind of shows how esports as an industry is moving much faster than AAA game development? Got brought up recently at, I think it was GDC by the former head of PlayStation, that AA is dead and AAA takes too long. Because Concord, I think, was 8 years.
yeah.
Basically started when Overwatch did.
I mean, it's the part where you see also a change in game development as well. We talked a little bit about AI and everything. You can make a good video game with a nearly small team, with a really small team, and you see a couple of games who, what was it, Dwarf Fortress? No. Can't remember that game, which was done by one person, and that's the part where you are able to, that the AAA concept is wrong nowadays. I mean, think about GTA 6. Yes, it will make a lot of money and they will break even and they will still make a lot of money, but how long does it take? And this is something where it might not be really about esports, the idea, but that game development is constantly changing quite a lot.
They haven't started on it yet.
But it's a part where I also have to say esports is not that fast moving. It is quite traditional in the sense, if you look at production, if you look at broadcasting, if you look at the idea how those commentators are looking like. That is textbook American football, American basketball and everything, where we are seeing that the most biggest rabbit hole for me was when StarCraft 2 came out and Twitch came out, how much they worked on the idea how the overlay should look like. Now all overlays look like same, and they are even horrible, the idea. Now we slowly see some changes with the Twitch API where you can create your own and customize it, but it's the part where esports on the AAA level is also not innovative. The cool part will be more on the modding scene, where we are back at the beginning with Counter-Strike, Aeon of Strife and everything, but that will be the fun part. So I see a lot of fun stuff be done with Fortnite World Creator.
Yeah.
That's the name? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, but I'm assuming it's about. They're not that creative, are they? So yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting facts as well is stuff like Fortnite World Creator, and it's a shame that Brian's not here, realistically, because he really does like his stepson. Is the fact that we're sort of seeing this change as well, where, and a lot of you would have had this experience in terms of Minecraft, right, and building stuff and building sort of mechanics within Minecraft. It was a little bit before my time, and I'm just going to say I am a lot younger than these guys.
Doesn't show.
I know, I'm more brave than all of you. Heartbroken. But no, it's the fact that we sort of see this wave of sort of game development and coding and the practice in terms of it and being able to use these assets and build these worlds and build these stories and build these narratives. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see where game development moves forward from it. I do wonder about the fact that we have now built so much tradition, I guess, within esports in terms of games that people play because they sunk so much time into it. and we've discussed this a lot, and I'll be interested to see your two points of view in terms of games like Dota and League of Legends, and if there's ever going to be another room for another MOBA, because of the fact that those games are now so complicated, and to get to even a base level of playing, it's a shame that Tom North's not here, because I got him to play League of Legends for the first time the other day against beginner bots, and that went 0-16. So the fact of the knowledge behind it is so, you spend so much time in it, it's very hard to move or adapt from that situation. Maybe we spend too much time within certain games.
Yeah, I think that, you know, my view on this is that it's unlikely that we will see it. First of all, there's not a lot of money in esports from a game development perspective, right? So if you're a game developer, a AAA game developer, you're probably not going to go into it to make money. So begs the question, why would you make that kind of title? Equally, the existing esports are so saturated that how are you going to have market penetration? Also very unlikely. So I think that your next, and Riot wasn't a AAA developer when when League of Legends
It's
came
still
out.
an indie company.
Yeah, well,
It's
so
made
I
in-
think
it's made,
that,
it's made in Freak's bedroom, isn't it?
Yeah.
so I think that, I think the next question is, what's the next esport? That's a good question to be asking. I certainly don't know the answer to that, but it'd be interesting to see what the new, and you're seeing a lot of remix. I think that's why I said Deadlock. I'm watching Deadlock because there's a lot of remixing with different genres in that space, and I think that's what we're seeing more of. I think that I don't think that the future is one where AAA developers really want to get involved in that space. In fact, my view is that really, yes, AAA is not dead, but it's only going to be the really well-established companies like Rockstar now, who can actually afford not to publish any games in how long? What was the last game that they published? In a lot of years, and then churn out these massively, really successful, pieces of work. That is going to be a rarity, because yes, there's just the economics just don't. You have to have a massive cultural cachet to be able to do that these days, and you need people to bankroll you and all kinds of things that you're just not going to be able to do. So I think that kind of
Yeah, it is the part where just think about Overwatch. But it was
so much potential.
So much potential, but it was a scrap project from Project Titan.
Yeah.
So technically, it was just a way to rescue it somehow. Hearthstone, whatever you think about it, it was a pet project from a team. Same with Teamfight Tactics. So a lot of, or take Fortnite for in that sense, a battle royale map, which was, it wasn't even intended to be that way. So it is still this miracle how to create a good esports title, or do we even have a dedicated esports game that is successful? Not counting Valorant in it because it's still not successful for Riot, but it's the part where we see this niche of development of esports titles. We don't have a tradition that works, and suddenly Rocket League is there, based on a map mode in Unreal Tournament, and it's rocking, to use that pun, with a concept where cars and
Top Gear did it first.
Top Gear, yes, coming from MMOs.
Yeah, but it's the part where it is hard to manage that, because suddenly it can be this weird mod someone did at some point, and we collectively decided that is the coolest thing in the world. I mean, Counter-Strike was not the best mod back then. That was Day of Defeat. I die on that hill.
That was a good game.
Yeah.
But, Toby really brings up a good point, and that is that, concepts matter, and I think that there are probably one or two games for each concept, and, really what you're seeing developers do, if they're trying to break in that space, purposefully, is that they're experimenting. I don't know enough about what happened with Concord other than it was a massive flop, but it just seemed to appear out of nowhere and didn't take off.
It's not in isolation though as well, because I mean there's the Suicide Squad game recently which has really underperformed. There was Anthem a few years ago, and they're all just big live service kind of competitive games where they kind of hope that they can kind of set up a platform economy, I think, around it. And I think that's how it makes economic sense to invest hundreds of millions in these games, because they see it as a way of trying to bring in the community. But I think what we're saying here is that, you know, esports are kind of found, they're not made, right?
Yeah.
And like it's really difficult to predict exactly what people are going to take to and what they're going to play.
And
I'm kind of with you.
I think Valve is taking Deadlock very slowly and carefully. They're not hyping it for that reason, because they know that it's an experiment ultimately.
The lead designer of Deadlock is Ice Frog, so who was originally a modder on Dota, the original Dota. So this person comes through, they met their lead designer in Dota 2, so they have this background in a modding community and being embedded in a playing community, and they probably recognise that
I think
you need that before you can jump the gun and just sort of release it and be like, hey.
I think there's two games that I think have potential that can make it to esports status this next year, which the two is Concord. I think that's not Concord, sorry. Deadlock. Concord definitely can't. We ignore
What universe are you in?
Yeah, sleep deprivation universe right now. Deadlock is one of them, and I think that's going to be because they're going to take a long time to sort it out. And the other one that's a little bit slightly further along within its sort of lifespan is Supervive.
Oh yeah, that is cool.
Because those two games have people who've really gone through that process, and they've taken it very slow, right? So they've done alpha testing, they've gone through it, and I've gone through all their test systems. So we've been doing this testing for Supervive for about 9 months at this stage, and we're nowhere near release date still. But the community's got bigger each time, so it will be. So the way it sort of worked was when they first came up with it, and I think this is something that helps in terms of growing the community before a launch, and I think Concord really struggled with this. A lot of game developers sort of really struggled with this, was they started off with a very, very small community. When I was in the pre-alpha stage, we had 1,000 game testers. We now have 100,000 game testers, right? But the only way you could go through all of that was you had to have someone who could give you a link, right? And they had to play at least one game with you. So they had to play the first game with you in the first alpha test. So if I wanted to, I got given 4 codes alongside me. I could invite 4 friends, but they had to play with me. So they had to play across over the weekend with me, and that was a good way to build it. So that when they left, in terms of when I played that game with them, they would then be given codes to go and send, and they had to play with 4 other people, and that's how you built it up. I think that is the way that, I guess, what we would classify as more traditional esports developers, I guess, and I'm going to use that term very loosely, are making that move into it.
Yeah, I think community building is key, absolutely key.
Because it's all about, you need to have to be an esport, you need players who want to play the game for thousands upon thousands of hours.
Yes.
And they need to also have that idea that there is a reward, or there is something that we can go out to. It's like Maslow's needs, right? I think in terms of risk versus reward. Any questions? Yeah, go on, Phil.
We've seen a couple of experiments with franchising in esports. It's been a hot topic in the last few years. With League being arguably successful and Overwatch League being arguably unsuccessful, how do you think franchising plays into the future of esports? Does it, and why?
I mean, it's the part where we see in the US franchising can work, that to be said. But how every esports title is doing it, they're doing it the wrong way. Because you have to have a talent pipeline. You have to have something below that is actually working to have a franchise system. So take basketball, take football, take everything. They have the collegiate system where hundreds of thousands of players come in and you can do this weird draft stuff. And then you can sustain it. But also, collegiate football is in itself sustainable. It is completely corrupted, and I hate every inch of it, but it is self-sustaining. And we don't have any tier 2 in any game in esports that is self-sustaining. So that is in itself its flaw. If they are achieving a sustaining tier 2 where the regional leagues in the UK and everything can live on their own, then we can think about having a franchise again. But that system is in itself flawed.
On that lovely note, if we've got another lecture coming in here, I think I'll call it into that. Thank you. You can give a round of applause, please. Hey, franchise.
Oh yeah, I had franchise as well, but we never had a system where
The European in me.